So we've just gone live. Again, welcome everybody to the Nature's Language call. I'm going to ask that if you don't, or if you're not comfortable with your video being shared on YouTube, that you push stop your video right now. And if you're staying on this call, then you're comfortable with us posting this afterwards, and you know that your video might be on the YouTube recording possibly. So welcome, Chris Gilmore here. It's our Nature Call series tonight, and I've got a really influential mentor in my life, as well as somebody that I consider a good friend as well, Dan Gardoqui. I know his whole family, and he's a really, really amazing gentleman. And yeah, I'm excited to introduce him to you shortly here. I'm just going to go through a couple other logistics first. So first off, we have somebody helping us kind of moderate the chat tonight, my good friend Sherry Ann. Some of you will know her from past calls. So if you see Sherry Ann post something in the chat, then just know that she's probably posting on behalf of myself or Dan. So if we mention like resources or websites or books through the night, Sherry Ann will often kind of grab the website and throw it down there. So just know if you see something from Sherry Ann, then, or if we reference something, watch for a post from Sherry Ann if you want to check that out. Sherry Ann, maybe you could just say hi down there so people see what your name looks like in the chat there. Sherry Ann, also, for those of you that are interested in the realm of plants and wild plants and medicine, she has a really cool Instagram account called Blue Jay Botanicals. So if you check out Blue Jay Botanicals, you can check out her work there. And she also has a podcast called Ignite Your Wild Podcast, where they dive into all kinds of topics, plant and nature related as well. So feel free to share those links down there too, if you want to check out, or if you want to share those, Sherry Ann. And yeah, check out her podcast. She's got some really cool stuff going on there with the Ignite Your Wild podcast. Upcoming logistics. So we've got a few calls left in this series. If you haven't caught some of the ones live, all the replays are up on YouTube. So in the follow-up email that I'll send out right after this one, I'll have links to the past calls if you want to check them out still. Next week, we have Stephen Martin. He's sometimes known as the Sacred Gardener coming up. A really fascinating call. And we're going to be actually really speaking a lot about relationship with the land through the art of gardening and growing food next week. So those of you interested in food, I think you'll really enjoy tuning into that one. And then I think 3 weeks from now, my wife Laura is going to be coming on from Wild Muskoka, and we're going to be diving in deep into wild harvesting and building relationship with the land and awareness through harvesting wild food. So there's a couple fun upcoming pieces. And our plan for tonight, like usual, we're going to do a little bit of an opening. And then we're going to do what we kind of call Nature's Corner, where myself and Dan are going to share a little bit about what we're noticing in our backyards right now. And then you're going to get a chance to go into a breakout group and check in with people from really all over the world and get a little bit of this glimpse of what's going on in the ecosystems around this continent, and maybe even several continents, depending on who's in your group. That's always kind of a fun one. And then we'll come back from that interactive part where you get to kind of speak in the breakout room. And that's when we'll dive into kind of the main piece for tonight, where Dan and I are going to discuss bird language. And, you know, what are the birds actually saying when they're making those noises, and what information can they give us, as well as trailing wildlife. So what does it mean to actually get on a trail of an animal or a track and follow it and learn from it? So super, super fun topics for this evening we'll be diving into. Maybe I'll just introduce myself really quick. For those that don't know me or coming on for the first time, my name's Chris Gilmore. I'm a long-term naturalist, outdoor educator, inspired wildlife tracker, lifelong learner. You can learn more about what I do over at chrisoutdoors.ca. I've got a bunch of courses that I offer over there, mentoring people and working with organizations. And then I also run Wild Muskoka. You can see the hat there. A ethically wild crafted foods business with my wife, Laura, who I mentioned is coming on a couple of weeks. And I'm going to introduce Dan in a couple of minutes here, but first I'd like to pass it over to him to actually do our opening. We start off each call with this little space just to kind of ground into our senses, shake off the busyness of the day, and just, yeah, really let us become kind of present in this moment. So with that said, I'd love to pass it over to you, Dan, to kind of bring our minds together in a good way and activate our senses.
All righty. Well, hey, everyone. Thanks for being here. I am Dan. And how about that Chris Gilmore? Oh, he's on this side of me, and this guy, he's something else, right? This guy, he's Chris and Laura. Sometimes it's hard to be a good human. Sometimes it's really hard to be a really good human. And I think those two do a heck of a job most of the time. So I just want to put some love and attention towards them because they do so much and share so much with the bigger world. And that's just awesome. So yeah, so just feeling a lot of gratitude for that. And I just that feeling, so you can do what y'all want. I'm going to close my eyes. You don't have to do that, but you're invited to. And I'm trying to imagine, I'm going to invite you to imagine a place that's really special to you, a place that you really feel super cozy, comfortable, and connected to outdoors somewhere in your world. It might be a little tree outside a house where you grew up. It might be in a, a park nearby a friend's home. It could be anywhere. So just take a minute and think about, where's that place? All right. Now I want you to imagine yourself in that place, doing whatever you want. Maybe you're taking a nap. Maybe you're poking around a stream. Maybe you're fishing. Maybe you're gathering. Maybe you're laughing with friends. You're walking with a little one. But you don't have a care in the world in this place. Taking a breath, smell that place, let that go. And you're kind of in that zone where like you just feel like you are just one element of that place. You belong to that place. You are not being like, oh, I'm interrupting, I'm interfering, I'm yada, yada, yada. No, you're just there. You are that place. And just be with that for a moment. Now, take another breath. And feel free to just kind of shake you a little bit if you want. If that works for you. Shake my arms. They're a little tired today. Legs are a little sore. You can open your eyes. You can come on back here to our virtual connected world. And you could keep that little place, though, somewhere in the back of your mind, front of your heart, wherever it is, because maybe it's been a while since you thought of that place. Maybe not, but you can keep it close. All right. And we are nothing but our connections. We don't exist without our connections. So that place is a part of you. My place is a part of me. Mine is a stinky, iron-rich stream that is mucky, and I used to play in it all the time as a kid. I knew nothing about it, knew nothing about the nature, but I was always drawn to go play in the mud there. Fell through the ice in the winter, and it'd come home smelling like irony, sulfur weirdness. But it's a place that's part of me. I mean, I literally absorbed the molecules from that place a bazillion times. So they are literally in me. And it's just a part of my memory, my living memory. So I carry it with me. And we are our places. We are our connections. So we'll start with that tonight. And I'll hand it back over to Chris. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. That was great. Funny enough, I actually went on a little journey. I wasn't even expecting to go there, but I started picturing the tree fort that I used to play in as a kid with these 3 split beautiful white birches. And my dad built this tree fort, and we had a sandbox underneath. And then there was a bunch of pines in front of it that we used to climb on there. And I've often think back to that spot and just like, what would my relationship with nature be like today if I didn't have that spot growing up? So that's always kind of a fun one to think about. What were those early influences? And the part that actually made me laugh, Dan, is while you were doing that little meditation there, I actually remembered burying one of my transformers in the sandbox. And I had this thought, I'm like, I wonder if that transformer is still there. Maybe I should go dig that up. So thanks for that little trip down memory lane. That was fun. Awesome. Yeah. So we're gonna just dive into this first part here that I'm just kind of calling Nature's Corner, and really just chatting about what's going on in our own backyards right now. And I love this because it kind of gives us a chance to have a snapshot of what's happening at different parts of this beautiful habitat that we live in, and the greater habitat of our continent. It's really, really neat. So I'll start off and just kind of share a couple observations from my neck of the woods. I'll pass it over to Dan. And then I'm going to split us into breakout groups afterwards, and you'll have the opportunity to share in your group if you would like to. And participation in that is obviously optional. If you don't want to participate, then feel free to sit that out as well. So, man, so much going on. It's such an exciting time of the year. One thing I would actually be curious, maybe people could even throw it in the chat really quick here, but weather. So spring came on super early here. Our lakes melted out the earliest that they have in quite a number of years here in Muskoka. And spring just came on with a fury. We had this big flush of birds coming back. The spring peepers started singing. And then even the spring ephemeral started coming out. The wild leeks, the spring beauties, all these things, the columbine started coming out. And then we got a cold snap this last few days. So it's been really cold up where I live. I'm in this area called Muskoka near Algonquin Park in Ontario. And I'd heard that, we're going through this cold snap, and just south of us, I heard they got snow. Someone was telling me that the West Coast is actually going through a heat wave right now and potentially having record-breaking heat out on the Pacific. So I'd be curious, maybe just throw in the chat, what's the weather going? And you can maybe just give us like hot or cold, like above seasonal, below seasonal, seasonal even would work. And I would say we're actually pretty seasonal right now weather-wise, but that's one thing that's on my mind. And something else that's on my mind with that is that, so we had this big, all of these birds came up with that warm stretch early in the season. And then all of a sudden there's been like this like 2-week lull, and I haven't seen a single new bird species in like 2 weeks now. It was just like every day for a while, it was new bird, new bird, new bird coming up. And now it's just gone quiet. And there's definitely some birds missing in our ecosystem right now. So that could be kind of a fun naturalist question for you folks. If all the birds haven't come back yet, who's missing from your ecosystem right now? Who haven't you heard or seen? I know up here, particularly, I'm thinking about the warblers. I haven't heard a warbler yet this year. I've also been noticing some changes, though, in the bird behavior of the birds that have been back for a little bit. And I had a question, actually. I want to ask this one for Dan. He might know because Dan's got some awesome bird skills. But I've been paying a lot of attention to the Junkos, dark-eyed Junkos. If you're not familiar with that one, you should look them up. I often call them the little ninja birds because they look like they're kind of small and they're all gray. And they're pretty vocal in the early spring and the fall, but then I find they're super quiet the rest of the year. And that's why I kind of call them ninja birds. They look like they've got these little gray ninja outfits. And generally, they're pretty stealth. But I've been noticing tons. So they came in a big flock and they were all hanging around together the first like week and a half or so. And just in the last couple of days, I've really seen them breaking into kind of small groups of 2 or 3. And I've seen lots of males actually starting to fight with each other. And I've been hearing some changes in their call. That's my question for Dan. Maybe I'll ask that a little bit later. So that's on my mind. Another one is, I'm curious how many people would recognize this call happening in the woods. And I don't know if I can quite do it, but it sounds something like this. I'll see if it works. Anyone know what I'm doing there?
Yeah, it didn't come through though.
You couldn't hear it, eh? Nice. Canadian bushcraft, our buddy Caleb there, he nailed it. Alex got it. Yeah, I've been hearing the thumping grouse. And for those that don't know that one, maybe you've heard it before, maybe you haven't, but you know, whenever new people come up to our region, people always say, what's that noise? It sounds like somebody starting up an engine. But the grouse, when they're mating, they actually do this thing where they display and beat their wings, and it sounds like an engine starting up. It's like thump, 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 thump. And it's quite bassy and carries over a long period of time. So I've been noticing that. I've been noticing the male tom turkeys starting to display. Saw one out on the middle of the road the other day, literally stopping traffic with its feathers all plumed up, being territorial. And one other one on my mind is just what are the fish doing right now? And I haven't been around water too much. I know last call I was sharing with you folks that I was out catching these little things called smelts. But I know that the trout are just getting ready to spawn right now. And that was something that was a big part of my life when I was a kid, going trout fishing in the spring. So I know that the rainbows are traveling up the rivers right now. I think the pickerel, the walleye are spawning in our area right now. So maybe another naturalist question for you is, what fish are spawning in your area? Whether you're a fisherman, fisherwoman or not, it's still just neat to know what's going on underneath the water that's not in your awareness right now. So yeah, those are some of the things that I'm noticing right now. Yeah, I'm curious, Dan, what are you noticing in your woods these days?
I'm noticing this Chris Gilmore guy has a lot of questions. He's thinking about a lot of stuff. I'll tell you that. He's pretty sneaky. You know, my mind's all over the place. You got a lot of energy, Chris. I love it. But I am noticing humans in my area got cold now, went away, but a lot more humans out and about. Even the new pandemic level of human activity, it's even slightly higher. Yeah, a lot of the same things are happening here. I live really close to the ocean, just a couple of kilometers. And so a lot of our rivers, we're waiting for certain fish to start to come up, and that could be exciting. The alewives will be coming up soon. Boy, there's all sorts of stuff. I'm waiting for the blue-headed vireo to come back. It's one of my favorite little spring birds that migrates through our area. It kind of sounds like a... It's like the red-eyed vireo who needs a coffee. Red-eyed vireo is like... So that's kind of cool. I love those little guys. Yeah, definitely paying a lot of attention to turkeys because we like to interact with turkeys and we like to eat turkeys. So we're paying attention to them, and we're paying attention to watching the soil warm up, and lots of little sprouts coming up in the garden, and the garlic's growing real strong. And I've got 2 teenagers, so I'm watching them and they're two male teenagers who are very excited about spring and getting out more and doing more things and hanging out with friends. And when it got warm, they got super excited and they were just out everywhere, longboarding down the road and hanging out in parking lots and doing COVID-y teen things. Yeah, so yeah, some of a little bit what's going on here. Maples are flowering and yeah, little trees are starting to bud out. It's an exciting time. That's what I got.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Man, I love it when Dan makes bird calls. You can see why I brought him in already. I was just thinking maybe instead of actually doing the call tonight, we'll just like every person can throw out one bird name and we'll see if Dan can imitate it. What do you guys think about that? We'll just switch the plan for the night. Put Dan on the spot.
Might be shorter than you think.
Yeah. Awesome. So folks, I'm just going to take a moment here. It looks like we got support from the crowd there, Dan. People are liking that idea. So I'm just going to prep our rooms here, folks. So just a couple pieces of information before we go into our breakout room. So really the question for the breakout room is kind of what's capturing your attention and your excitement in your neighborhood these days? You know, what are you paying attention to when it comes to nature and its cycles? And for this piece, I just want to welcome you regardless of your level. I mean, if you're a total beginner to this and you have no idea what Dan and I have even been chatting about so far, it's totally great to just show up with wherever you are and learn. Feel free to participate as much or as little as you want. You're welcome to go into a breakout room and just listen and not share. You're also welcome to go in there and share what you do, share questions, share thoughts, even ask questions. You know, if you've got a mystery question in your mind, it's pretty loose that way. But really, it's just chatting about what's going on in your backyard, what's capturing your attention with nature. And I'll just, reiterate that all voices are welcome and just ask that everyone be super respectful of that as well. That everyone's welcome in this group, regardless of where they're coming from and their perspective on things. So the other thing I'll just say from a logistical perspective is that if you're in a room and you're having any technical issues, or particularly if you end up in a room and no one else is in there with you, just hang tight for a couple of minutes, because the first few minutes after we start these, I'll be in there kind of looking to make sure that all the rooms are working properly and trying to fix them. If after a couple of minutes there's still an issue, feel free to leave the room and come back into the main one, and then I can try and help you out. I'll be in here the whole time. So without further ado, I'm going to hit the go button here, and you should see something pop up on your screen that gives you the opportunity to join the breakout room right now. Oh, we're going to go in for about 10, 12 minutes. Looks like we have everybody back. So awesome. Welcome back from that room. Hope you had some fun with that. So we're going to dive into the next part of this call, which is really the kind of main theme of tonight's call, which is around this idea of talking with birds with Dan here, as well as trailing wildlife and what we can learn from wildlife. And I've just realized I never actually really formally introduced Dan. So maybe I'll actually just start with that piece right now. I kind of forgot that during our opening piece there. But
I was wondering who I was. I was really confused. I was like, who am I? Why am I here, man? What's going on?
But those are big questions, Dan. That might be a little beyond what we can get into in tonight's call. So you can spend your whole life working on that one. So, so I started following Dan. I actually first heard about Dan through this program, through an organization called the Wilderness Awareness School years ago. And I heard his story through, I think, a book called the Kamana Program, which is this like kind of home study naturalist program that was really pivotal in my kind of naturalist journey and my connection with the land. And then, a few years went by, and I started following this school that he was running that he founded at the time called White Pine Programs. He's actually moved on from there since then. But he had a wildlife tracking apprenticeship down in the American Northeast. For those that don't know, I live up in Canada in Ontario, but me and a couple of good friends, my wife included, decided that we were going to take Dan's apprenticeship. And we basically drove like between 12 and 14 hours each way, one weekend a month for 8 months. And it was the best use of time I've ever spent. I learned so much down there. We basically go down and, we did a lynx tracking weekend where we were focused all on tracking lynx out of a lynx research station. And we tracked bobcats and gray fox and black bears. And I just learned so much. We basically just get together with like a group of geeky naturalists and we go out and follow wildlife. And during that time, I really connected with Dan, and he started coming up to Canada to help us with some workshops up here. We've become friends. I know his family now. So I consider him a really good friend, but he's also been a really influential mentor for me. And he's still a mentor for me. I just told him before the call tonight that I'm about to sign up for one of his online courses coming up that I'm really excited about. So that's what I can say about Dan. He's a great guy, phenomenal naturalist, phenomenal birder, and a really great mentor that truly cares about the people he's working with. So I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that, Dan, just about yourself, or are we good there?
No, but I'm going to do a few bird imitations because they're stacking up. Now, this does not mean I'm going to do everyone or that I even can do everyone, but I want to at least acknowledge that people are asking and try and do a few. So let's see, I'm going to try this one and maybe folks can guess what it is. You guys hear that? It's a hard one to do. Yes, that is the American bittern. It doesn't sound as good on a video. Nice. Weird, freaky bird in emergent marshes, cattail swamps. You got to check this dude out. Just look at some images of bitterns. They will freak you out.
I wonder if you can you imitate a bittern like in the reeds with a little bit of wind while you're doing the call?
No, I cannot. That's your job. You could do the like the miming while I do the sounds. All right, that'll be our little team.
Yeah.
Let's see, one more. I had a goldfinch request. So they're singing like mad right now here. They are just all jacked up. So kind of like a like that. So American goldfinch, great little singer. Kind of like that. Fun little suckers. Yeah, and if folks dig the bird videos, I've got a whole series called Learn a Bird on YouTube and on Instagram TV you can check out, and it is only growing slowly but surely. Once the wind stops here, I will be back at it, hopefully this weekend. But yeah, no, I wouldn't add anything else except I just can't help getting excited about the natural world. And yeah, birds are definitely a specialty of mine. It's something I'm crazy about. I think birds are just like amazing teachers, and they remind me to pop my little bubble of my own little human existence, which is fine. It's fine being human, but sometimes I can only think in human ways. So they remind me there's a more than human world to pay attention to, and they help me. They help ground me in a lot of ways, frankly, and just kind of boom, they like call me to attention when I'm paying attention, and they remind me when I'm not, if I'm paying attention. So I think birds are fabulous in so many ways, and that's why I love to be engaged with them, not necessarily making their noises all the time, but at least listening and kind of, trying to give them some space and playing around with them and all that good stuff.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Something I've been really working with for a couple of years now, and particularly during this pandemic when I find myself spending so much time on the computer, as I've been cracking the window just a little bit and trying to at least keep the birds in my awareness throughout the day, even when I'm on the computer. And it just kind of reminds me there's more than my little bubble there. And sure enough, every once in a while, like I'll hear something really interesting going on outside with the birds, and I'll be like, oh, I got to go check that out. And, I'll run upstairs and head outside and I'll look around a little bit, and, maybe I'll see a hawk up in the sky flying over, or, a little bird fight or something. So I've been actually finding it really good kind of medicine just for my mind and my soul when I'm spending so much time on the computer these days. To try and stay connected to them even throughout the day. So I can definitely relate with what you're sharing there. There's one question. This wasn't the one I was going to open up with, but it's actually someone just threw it in there. Oh, it's already lost in the mix there. But she was basically asking, Dan, like, so did you just were you just born making bird calls? Like that's how you just you came out of your mama and started making bird calls? Or is this something you actually practiced and learned? And maybe my part two of that is any advice for people that actually wanted to get better at making bird calls?
Yeah, I've got a video called How to Mimic Birds. It's on my YouTube channel. It's worth watching. It tells a story, but the long story short is I've always been a kind of hyperactive, kind of annoying, energetic person, some would say. So I've always mimicked things in my world. I've always made noises that I hear around me. And I wasn't even into birds until I was in my teen years. So when I first started to want to learn birds, and I would just hear, I would hear a and I'd be like, that would I'd hear that. Then I'd be like, oh, I want to make that noise, and help me cement them and learn them for me. So whatever, I guess some people say they're visual learners, audio, I don't know. I just made the bird noise, and then it helped me remember, oh, that noise goes to that little sparrowy looking thing with the little stripes on its head and a little white on its throat there. And that I didn't even know their names. I just was like, that thing makes that noise. And then eventually I'd go home and open my old school field guides and tear through trying to find them. I think it's that one. I don't know. And then take a few iterations to figure them out. So yeah, but I always just mimicked a lot of different stuff. And
Awesome.
I kind of still do.
And you know,
yeah. Go ahead.
Sweet. So you've got, or just for people that are asking there, so the series is called Learn a Bird, and the YouTube channel is just called Lead with Nature YouTube channel.
Yep.
Yep. And then
Yep.
the Learn a Bird series. Oh, and Sherry Ann just shared it. So if anyone wants to check it out, Sherry Ann just put it in the chat there. So Dan, beyond just like learning how to ID the birds, which is super cool in its own, to just be like, oh, cool, what's that? That's a robin, that's a winter wren, that's a whatever. You know, you've got a course and you actually are calling it Talking with Birds, I think. And I believe that's what you called it. And what does that to mean to you, talking with birds?
So I used, a lot of people call some of these called similar skill sets bird language, but that didn't work as well for me because I wanted something that was more interactive. So talking with birds implies we're actually in conversation, and there's a mutual connection there, right? Mm-hmm. So when we're talking with birds, we're actually engaged in conversation with them. And that conversation isn't necessarily, right? It could just be like, oh, what's that bird doing? And that bird's like, oh, what's that person doing? I'm like, oh, where are you going? I'm going over here. Well, I'm eating right now. I don't know where you think. Oh, crap, I'm out of here. So like, it's like there's this push, pull, tension, release, all this cool stuff going on. And it just makes, so when I say talking with birds, I mean, we're awake and aware to the fact that we share the world with birds and that they're amazing teachers. And they can help us learn. I mean, they're speaking a language. Every other species is more or less listening to it most of the time. And we're one of the only ones who isn't. And it's easy to understand. Doesn't take rocket science. It doesn't take a PhD in ornithology. It just takes a nervous system, which we all have. And if we tune into that and we trust it and we pay attention to it, we will be able to understand what they're saying to us. So in my Talking with Birds course, we do a lot of that. We also geek out a little bit on specifics and a little sciencey stuff, but we talk about how to make those connections and how to get into that little bit of a dialogue with them. At least the way that it tends to work for me, and some people do in other ways. But yeah, so that's what it is. It's being awake and engaged with the fact that we are in conversation with birds, whether we're conscious of it or not. That's what Talking with Birds is.
Cool. I'm wondering if you can elaborate. So you just said if you have a nervous system, you can do this. So can you make the connection there? Like how does tapping into your nervous system help you actually tap into the language of the birds and what's going on there? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So we think about our senses in general. We think about sight, sound, touch, taste, feel, a lot of different things. But when we think about our ability, like our somatic sense, our senses to where we can detect if someone is close to us, our senses where we can detect where someone is staring in the back of our head, the senses where we can walk into a room and I instantly know the temperature of that room. Like what, if there's a heavy, intense conversation, you don't have to look at the transcript. You just be like, whoa, something's going on here. So our nervous systems are keep us alive and healthy and well because they're tuned into situations where we need to stay calm, stay still, flee, pay attention, all these little things that over time, like every other species, because we are nature, we are like everything else, we've had to do to survive. And all of us are here because all of our ancestors were able to at least get to breeding age and make babies who made more babies. So they at least lived to that age, which means they were paying attention or they were being taught to pay attention by others. And so when I say, if you have a nervous system, you can interpret this, it just means that it's no different than paying attention to people around us and reading people, because birds are just, they're another living being in our environment, and we don't have to be expert birders. And when I first went down this path, I did it all wrong, folks. Like I thought it was all about like, okay, you need to know that the ground birds speak these two languages, and then the sky, it's not even about that. Like you don't have to know their damn names. You have to know all that stuff. When I travel in different parts, which I don't do often, but when I get to travel around the world and do stuff, and I show up, I try to learn the names because I think it's fun. I like geeking out. I like looking in books and all that, but you don't have to know the names of the birds to understand what they're telling you. They're all saying the same thing, the same simple messages. Like, so yeah, we have the hardware to do this, and we just need a little tweaker. And some of us do, some of us probably know this 10 times better than I can ever, but I just know enough of it and excited to share enough of it that I see most people already can do this, and they just need a little like reminder and a tweak, right? A little update to their little operating system, and then they're going, you know, because we're doing it anyway, and usually unconsciously. Like, yeah.
That's so great. You know, I can really resonate with that story because it's kind of funny. You know, I spent a ton of time as a kid playing in the woods and outdoors and camping, but I didn't necessarily have like mentors in naturalist skills or awareness or anything like that going up. So I was kind of brought into that world in a pretty kind of formal way through the, you know, a lineage through what the Wilderness Awareness School was doing. And I remember, I think it was about 2003, I went out to the Wilderness Awareness School in Washington, and I'd been reading all about bird language. And, you know, they talk about like the 5 voices of the words and alarms and all of these things, but I had such a little baseline in actual birds as far as like ID and stuff. And I was trying to think about it from this very like Western scientific mindset. And I was just like, I was really struggling. I'm like, I don't know. I read about this alarm thing. Is that an alarm? Is that? And I was just really struggling, like trying to translate like this framework for like birds in this kind of scientific way to this actual language. But ironic enough, I'm sitting in a park and I'm watching these robins. And this is literally, I'm about to go to the Wilderness Awareness School for my first time. And I'm camped out in this park and I'm sitting there and there's these robins. And, you know, for like maybe a half an hour, I'm watching them feed in the grass and they're picking up worms. And then they fly up to this tree. And then they come back down and they fly up. And all of a sudden, this robin shot up into a tree and like the hair went up on the back of my neck. And I was just like, whoa, something felt different there. Like I just noticed that like, even though I've been watching them fly up and down for like a half an hour, like something just felt different. And then literally like a minute later, a dog came running down the trail. And I just had this like massive light bulb moment, like, oh my goodness, you've been overthinking this. Like you're trying to be too scientific and put these into boxes. Like it's that simple, you know? And the analogy that I've kind of come up with or use sometimes when I'm teaching people about bird language, it's like, you know, when a bunch of kids are like playing and they're like calling for help like all day long, and you just know that they're playing, but then one of them gets hurt and they call for help and they're actually hurt. And like, you just instantly like, you know, and you go, I'm like, that's how bird language kind of works too, you know? But for some reason, it actually took me a long time to realize it was that simple. Yeah. And I love that framework of like the 5 voices, the alarms, the calls, and so. But I actually, that was almost too much for me getting going. I actually needed like the simpler version. Totally. So that's where I really connect with your story there, Dan.
Yeah, I oscillate back and forth with that, but they're like, for anyone who's just getting into it, I think it's helpful to know that it's super accessible. And it doesn't matter to me like how people do it. Go do it any way you want. But you know, when people come to study with me, like we just make it as accessible as possible. But then we also can give people those structures for the really nuanced kind of interpretation of what they're saying. So it's one thing to be like, oh, that bird's saying, as far as I know, everything's fine. But you could say, well, what's fine? And where is it in its breeding cycle? And where is its mate right now? Where is its nest? And what are its major concerns, right? Or you could just say, oh, that bird's really upset. Great. But you can also say, what's making that bird upset right now? What is likely? Where is the thing that's making it upset? And who else told it that it's making it upset? And where are they? And what are they saying right now? And so when you know, a lot of this stuff was I was made aware of this through one of my first mentors in this area named John Young, and him and I worked together. He wrote this book called What the Robin Knows, and How Birds Reveal Nature's Secrets. And I did all the science and the audio editing for the book, and John and I spent a lot of time together working on this as like a teaching, a way to just bring this and share this with people for many years. And so we did create all those structures, you know, and it took a while. Sometimes you have to go through the structures and let them go in order just to kind of be like, oh, actually, it's a lot simpler than we thought. So they're helpful, but some people they get tripped up on them a little bit.
Yeah, and I actually love. Oh, I was just going to say, I love the structures now. Like I work with them a ton and I find them really helpful to kind of ask those deeper questions. But just where I was at in my journey, it almost was like it made them inaccessible until I realized how simple it was. And now that I've gotten through that barrier, I love kind of actually the structures and the patterns and, you know, shapes of alarms and all that stuff. But let's maybe back up. I mean, for people that are fairly new to bird language, and this whole kind of concept, like what's some like basic steps that people could go out into their backyard tomorrow and start picking up on this? If you wanted a little bit of structure to how you would approach that in a way where you might learn something or you might get a taste of it.
Great. I'll tell you that after I do one more bird.
Yeah.
All right. So here's one. This one's really, I don't know if I'm going to do it justice, but I'll try it. So it's kind of a swirly upward spiraling. Well, anyone?
I got to guess, but I'll see what comes up in the nice.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. Matthew with the Swainson's thrush. Yes, that was supposed to be a Swainson's thrush, but it could be the Veery. I mean, it could be a lot of them, but nice. Thank you. So yeah, real basic start to tune into this thing, this way of kind of talking to birds, paying attention to birds. I believe I also have a video on my Lead with Nature page, but if not, if you just Google how to do bird sits and you put my name and Audubon, California, I did a bunch of seminars for them. We talk a lot, my colleague Molly and I talk about how to basically just go chill out and pay attention to birds. I mean, the short answer is, well, like right now, the Pine Project's doing this great thing called I think it's a sit-a-thon, where you basically just go and like chill out and sit down and stop moving and pay attention. That's a great way to tune into birds. And really, I just tell people, slow down, tune in, take a breath, and just let it come to you. It's out there and it's happening. Like, and so we just need to make room and space for it. You know, our most valuable a commodity right now is our attention. Like it is a commodity, it is commodified in the world, right? And so we have that attention to give anywhere we want. And if we choose to give it to the more than human world and pay attention to the messages that are coming to us, like that's a great way to tune into birds. To say, I'm consciously going to pay attention to what's happening beyond me. And, you know, just turn off my phone or stick it in my pocket or whatever it is, get it out of the way. And I just want to like actually listen. And it doesn't even matter if we know exactly what they're saying, but we tune into a conversation. It's like when you travel and you go to a place in a different language. And if you happen to not know that language, like most of us Americans, because we only speak American, no offense, fellow Americans, some of you are probably much smarter than me and speak many languages. However, we often don't. So we go places and we're confused, but you can still learn from a conversation if you don't know that language. And that's the same thing for birds. You can get the general feel what's happening in that dialogue.
Awesome. The other one I would maybe just throw in the mix there too is just, you know, asking good questions, you know, because you could just notice a bird make a sound and just leave it at that, like, oh, that was a pretty sound. Or you could ask a question and be like, oh, I wonder if that was like, were they calling to another bird, or were they like, are they singing? Are they trying to find a mate? Like just asking a question and then like being curious, you know,
yeah,
is such a powerful tool in that, you know, so.
Yeah, no, totally.
Mm-hmm. What about do you have a favorite bird language story or that you'd maybe share with us, or maybe even just a story that kind of demonstrates how bird language might be practical, you know? And I mean, I want to say that it's all practical on such level, but in like, you know, it gave you a piece of information about the landscape or told you something that you found useful for some sort of modern human practical kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I get you, man. Yeah, so I'm a big fan of, I mean, it's still not a large percentage of my diet. I guess it's all relative, but I like to eat a lot of wild foods whenever I can, or whenever I have the impetus, skills, knowledge, patience, and all that stuff to actually go and do it. And sometimes I'm just lazy and I like the supermarket. But anyway, when I do that, often birds are helpful. So whether I'm hunting or foraging, I do try and use birds as helper species, frankly, to help me understand what's happening so that maybe I can have more success. So I was just recently telling a story where I had one of my kids was at a sports event. It was a couple hours from our town and it was somewhere I'd never been, but it was about this time of year, maybe a little later. And I was like, ooh, I'm out of my watershed and my drainage, which is like super sandy, acidic soils, and it's terrible for fiddleheads, like nice little emergent ferns. We get all sorts of ferns, but none really tasty ones. No ostrich fern right here. So I was like, oh, I want to go find some fiddleheads. I mean, yeah, logic would just say you would go to the river bottoms and, you know, you'd go to places where there was nice soils that were probably mineralized and enriched. But I didn't know this area at all, and it was super hilly and strange. And so I was driving with the windows down, and I heard the call of a Louisiana water thrush, and I was like, or the song. I was like, water thrushes, they hang out the bottoms of the watersheds, like, and that's probably a good place where there's some soils. So I started like pulled over and waited and like listened again. I was like, all right, found a little spot I can access this area, and started wandering around. Found a little patch, you know, it wasn't huge, but it was cool. I was like, oh, that was fun. Found some other stuff in there, some nice trout lily and some other little tasties. So in that case, it was thinking about birds and their habitats and understanding, having a connection with that bird in a place and knowing, oh, that bird tells me that it is in a place like this. When it's migrating, maybe not so much, but usually. And then, you know, on the hunting side of things, I mean, there's 100 stories, but Birds are so sensitive to predator-prey relationships, depending on what's going on around them. And they're often watching and listening to see if, say I'm hunting turkeys, which I do here. Those turkeys in the fall, I like to hunt them in the fall and the spring, but in the fall, I'm following flocks through the woods and I'm reading sign on the ground and trying to get close to them and this and that and trying to predict where they might go. And a couple of falls ago, I was out and this gobbler group, which means a bunch of older male turkeys, had totally dissed me. They got me so good. They just like, yeah, whatever. We know you're coming. And they ditched on me. I tried to trail them and follow them, and it was just a tough trail. I wasn't capable of following it. So I just decided to try and loop around because I knew the landscape. And anyway, I'm sneaking super quietly and trying to just listen and listen. And I'm listening to a flock of feeding chickadees. And the chickadees are doing, they're kind of like, kind of calling, and they're back and forth, kind of did up and high in the pines. And at some point, the chickadees just stopped completely. They weren't too high up, actually, because these were younger pines that were growing in an old road. Anyway, and they just stopped. And something in my gut was like, what did they notice? And so I just stopped. And then I just got ready to get this turkey. And sure enough, as the red head just kind of pops out 15 yards ahead of me, it was really thick in there. So I was able to harvest that turkey. I was able to take that turkey home and eat that turkey with a bunch of people and share it. It was lovely and delicious. But those chickadees told me to just, hold up, pay attention here. And that bird did the same exact thing. It knew I was coming and I kind of knew it was coming. And then it was just, modern advantage of human weaponry over a fast bird. But, so that bird did not live to tell that story, but its offspring did, because they're in my yard today. So yeah, sometimes birds literally tell us helpful things. I mean, I've had people share tons of stories. I got a detective in Oklahoma who actually found a fugitive using bird language. I mean, they can tell you a lot once you start to tune in and understand the baseline and kind of what you expect to hear. And then when something's out of that, it's like, whoa, something's going on. And then you look and you pay attention, and maybe there's some information for you right there.
Awesome. One of the places that I've been really trying to dive a little bit deeper in my own journey lately is around just, predicting weather. And interesting, I was a canoe guide for about 8 years, and I haven't done it in probably almost 8 now, actually, as well. But during my canoe guiding, I got pretty good because you're out all day long and you're watching the skies and stuff like that. But I've been really having a lot of fun trying to pay attention to birds and insects as they relate to changing weather systems. And I can think of a really fun story. A couple of years ago, I was actually out with a group. And it was like this beautiful sunny day. And I got to be fair, I knew that the weather was supposed to shift. I'd looked at the weather that morning and stuff, but it's like one of those days where it was like super, super still, like beautiful, sunny, all the birds were singing in the morning when we get out there, and we're hanging out. And all of a sudden, it's like 11 o'clock in the morning, and the forest just went like silent. Like there was no bird activity. And I had this moment of just being like, oh, I wonder if that's the start of the storm right now coming in. And I actually said to the group, right before that, I actually noticed that it was like chaotic. Like the birds were almost like too chaotic and like they were moving all over. And then it went dead silent. And I actually called the group in. I'm like, oh, we're going to play with this. And I'm going to take a chance here to see what's going on. And so I called everyone in and said, hey guys, what are you noticing with the birds? And folks are like, most people weren't really thinking it because they were building shelters and doing some survival stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, let's all just sit and listen. And everyone's like, oh, I don't really hear any birds right now. It was, and we're looking around and it's like, it's dead still. The sun's up. It's beautiful. It's 11 o'clock. Like there should be tons of bird activity. And like 20 minutes later, like a tree just bent over sideways. And then this like black cloud came in and it was basically snowing on us. And it was just so neat that, the birds like all morning long were telling us this storm was coming in. So that's one that I've been really playing, and maybe something folks at home that are new to this as well. If you know that the weather is about to shift, that can be a great opportunity to like get a track of what, we sometimes call in bird language this idea of baseline. Maybe that's even a good question, Dan. I love that concept of baseline. I play it in tracking. I apply it in bird language. But do you want to maybe do a quick little definition of like what that kind of means and as it relates to learning about birds and talking with birds, getting information from them?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've all had experiences, I would imagine, of going somewhere new and just not knowing it. A new job, a new school, new in-laws, relationship, whatever. And everything is new and different, and you're just out of your zone. And so baseline is just when you get to the point where it's no longer new and it's just part of your base experience. So with bird, so it's knowledge of place is what it is. In the naturalist sense, it's knowledge of place. And the deeper your knowledge of place, generally, a knowledge of place is positively correlated with time spent in that place paying attention. So the more we pay attention and the more we interact with, I would say too, with a place, the more we learn about it. And then the more we get to know and learn and expect things to happen there, right? Like even probably, I moved to this place where I live now 20 years ago. And even 10 years ago, I was not intimately familiar with that little blue-headed vireo I was doing earlier. It wasn't a bird I knew well, but now I know right about the time the lilac buds are totally open, and right about the time that the wood frog eggs are just about to hatch, that's when that bird usually shows up. And that's not like magic, that's just experience of doing the same thing in the same place again and again and again. I mean, we all know this. Like, we all know intimate knowledge about little strange things in the world. So, mine just happens to be about the nature stuff right now and where I live. So that's how you build a baseline. And when we're learning about bird language and how to interpret what's happening with birds, we expect to hear, see, and feel certain things with the birds because we're seeing it again and again and again and again. And then when there's something different than that, it's like, whoop, a little flag goes up, a little red light goes on. You're like, hold up, something's different here. And the funny part is baseline is relative. Like the first time you see something like a behavior, maybe you see a bird anting, which is when birds will go on ant mounds and put their wings down and let the ants crawl all over them and get out. And the formic acid supposedly kills certain little bugs and germs that they get. They don't like. First time you see it, like, that is so weird. A bird's on an ant mound, but then there's certain species of birds that ant all the time. And like, it's just actually a pretty common behavior at certain times of year. So there's like seasonal, behavioral, sex-based, there's all sorts of different things that might seem out of the norm, but the more you learn about them, the more you learn they're just part of the baseline you haven't learned yet. And then there's things that are just like really intense that jump out at you. So it's just about paying attention. And when something gets your attention, to let your curiosity lead you to say, what's happening here? What can I learn from this? Like Chris said, ask those questions. What is happening here? What can I learn from this? And then it just never stops. It's going to just keep going.
Awesome. Yeah. And I mean, a great way to start is like Dan had mentioned, the sit spot challenge that the Pine Project is doing right now. But like, if you were to just pick a spot in nature, and if you were to go there at the same time, every day for a week, or maybe it's once a week for a month, like you would have if you go at the exact same time, you're going to have a good idea of what the baseline is if you pay attention. Like, oh, when I go there, the robins are singing and the song sparrows are singing and there's people walking their dogs and whatever. And then if you go back 1 week at that exact same time and it's like dead quiet, then maybe the question comes up, oh, well, why is it quiet right now? Like I've been here like 4 times at this exact same time and there was a lot of noise. So that's kind of what we're speaking to bird language. The concept of baseline. And it's a really valuable tool to play with. We got a couple of questions coming in here. One actually, Alex, I think, was just asking me. She said, is that typical of birds before a storm? Frantic behavior and then silence? I mean, I don't want to pretend to be an expert of all scenarios, but I feel like I've definitely seen that happen a number of times, particularly between like, not if there's just like a light rain or like a kind of an average storm coming in, but when like a real big front is coming in, I definitely feel like I notice like a pickup in activity and then like this little period of silence right before it hits when it's coming in hard. Would you agree, Dan, or do you have a different take on that? Nope,
I agree, and I'll give you a bird. Here we go. Man, let's see. So it's almost like a buzzy robin-y sound. I don't know if you can hear it. So beautiful bird, hangs out in the upper canopy, gorgeous black and red, sexy little bird. Actually, mid-sized bird anyway. Yes, and that would be a scarlet tanager. Very nice, very nice. Okay. Yes, I would agree with you, Chris. Yeah, a lot of wildlife will, you can read weather through wildlife behavior and practice, and there's probably a lot of that I have no clue about, but there's definitely some I've seen quite a bit, different activity patterns, especially with big storms.
Yeah, Lee Jorgensen just wrote in the chat there that bees do the same thing. They'll get quite, I know Lee's a beekeeper, and they get quite frantic before a big storm too. So that's kind of neat. There was another question for you. Someone was asking, hold on. So do you think getting to know place is possible for nomads who roam the whole planet, or do you need to be settled? So are there tools, like if you're traveling a lot, how do you tune into that baseline place or fast? Are there tricks for that, or?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about what that question is, like, there's probably whole sets of knowledge that knowledge at a wider scale about human behavior. And so, I mean, so if I were a nomad traveling between human and more than human communities, again and again and again, number one, you'd probably have to pay a good bit of attention to what's going on around you because you're new everywhere you go in some ways. So yeah, I would, I am not a nomad, so I do not know. I am a homebody. So my guess would be there's a whole nother set of knowledge and experience, a kind of a knowledge of play, a knowledge of kind of like humans on a broader scale and and other than humans and all that stuff. So I'm not sure, but I guess there is.
I mean, the one thing I could share on that, I would say up until like my early 20s, like I was completely clueless to the idea of bird language. And, really, I want to say clueless to like 99.9% of like everything. But, now I'm maybe like 98% clueless. And so I've made a bit of progress since then. But where I was going to go with that is, after like really practicing sit spots in one area for like multiple years and like really getting to dial in on the baseline of my area, I do feel like I'm able to go into, and like I've actually thought about that kind of consciously when I go into a new ecosystem now, like how quickly can I pick up on the baseline? And I even really like playing around with it with urban areas and cities, like the baseline of like people and streets. So I'll play around with that a lot, like I'll go into a city that I'm not familiar with and I'll just go downtown and I'll just really quickly do an assessment. Okay, what's baseline here? And then what's out of baseline? And it's actually really interesting, some of the stuff that you'll actually pick up on and notice that you might not have otherwise if I hadn't just asked that question, So I definitely think there are some some skills that you can kind of take with you. And the more you understand it in one place, the easier it's going to maybe be to apply in other places, at least aspects of it. So from my own experience there. Maybe we can move on to the realm of tracking and trailing wildlife, Dan. And a lot of people might associate tracking, the term tracking maybe as being a hunting thing. But I think the majority of people I know that are passionate about tracking, it's not actually from a hunting perspective. It's actually about relationship with the animals, the land. It's learning about these creatures that we share the earth with. So maybe an opening question would be like, what does tracking mean to you? That term, and then we'll go into this topic of trailing and actually learning from animals through their trails. But what do you think of when I use the word tracking?
Paying attention to the movement of energy. Sorry to be so broad, but that's really to me what tracking is. So if we're talking about like wildlife tracking specifically, then it's paying attention to the evidence, the signs, the scats, the tracks, the feeding sign, the carcasses, the markings, everything that an animal leaves behind, and not necessarily leaves behind, but animal does as it interacts with with the natural world. So paying attention to those things, giving those things our attention to ask more questions, to better understand that animal's experience. Again, and to just grow our kind of empathy and understanding of the more than human world, which at least for me in my lineage and experience, my ancestors forgot for a long time. They went down a very different path. So I have to remember that. There's some people with that uninterrupted lineages where that's just still real and every day for them, and that's beautiful. But for me, and maybe some of you, that got interrupted. And so it's a lot of remembering and relearning, and tracking is paying attention and trying to learn from all these little things about the rest of the world around us and all the connections between the other living things we share the planet with, right? How that porcupine is in relationship with that hemlock tree, and how that's in relationship with those little false truffles underground, how those are in relationship with the mycorrhizae that communicate to the beech trees next to them, that communicate with the maple trees, that communicate with other fungi, that communicate with yada yada. It just keeps going. So it's about connections, and tracking it to me is, again, paying attention to the movement of energy. And energy moves through systems in so many ways, so many ways. And so to me, that's what I think about when you ask about tracking.
Awesome. Yeah. Well said. Yeah, it's kind of cool because again, I mentioned that I wasn't necessarily brought up with mentors. I would definitely relate to your story there, where in my lineage, this kind of connection and awareness was definitely lost for a good period of time. And when I first approached the tracking, my only real mentors at first were actually from this very scientific perspective, and it was all about kind of names and collecting data. And when I started meeting kind of so-called trackers, people that were going out and following and doing this questioning and bridging beyond just like identifying a species and like how do they actually fit into the context of their habitat and ecology and this greater story, and not only the story of the moment but the story of the last week and maybe the last year and even the history of this land long term. It suddenly just added this holistic layer and this relational piece of connecting to the woods that just completely transformed my relationship with the land and who I was as a person. And I'm really glad it came in as a pivotal point because, I was going to school for forestry at the time and actually getting into this mindset where it was like, oh, trees were something to like measure and turn into a product. And I love trees, but that was just like what I was being taught. And it was almost like this other spark came in and like saved me and balanced that out in a more holistic way. And that's what I kind of accredit to tracking and why I'm so passionate about it myself. Let's chat about trailing. So, in tracking, you could kind of break it down into different disciplines or different aspects. Yeah, it would be one way to look at it. And one of those is the idea of trailing. So I come across a footprint on the ground, a track, and there's an animal that's somewhere out there that made that print. And they've made a whole bunch of prints between here and there. So maybe, I don't know where you want to go with that, Dan, if you have a cool trailing story that you want to share or does this one come to mind?
I want to go on that trail, man. I want to go on the trail. You got me so excited. I was picturing those tracks, right? So potentially in the development of our species, of our kind, of this interesting apes that we are, there was some moment when we understood, or moments when we understood how to read that and understood that there was a connection, there was a temporal aspect to marks on the ground, and that certain ones were fresher and older than other ones, and certain ones could lead us to proteins and foods or whatever we're looking for, habitats where we might forage for other things. But that was a massive jump in the development of hominids, really. I mean, it was huge, hugely important. And so it's a really old story. Like following a trail is one of the oldest stories, books, tales you could ever have. And it's still out there every day. There are trails everywhere, through the middle of urban parks to rural, Alberta. I mean, there is just tons of trails. And so trailing is, if tracking is kind of like putting together little, I don't know, letters to make words, trailing is like putting together words to make stories for me. And so if I'm following an animal's, trying to follow an animal's trail, because I lose the trail all the time. It's super normal. Everyone loses trails. They're really hard to follow sometimes, depending where you are. I've lost elephant trails, dudes. I've lost a pack of like 15 elephants. I lost their trail completely. You'd be surprised. It's not that hard. So anyway, following trails is just like pulling. It's like pulling on your curiosity string, and you're just like, what is going on? Where is this animal? What was it doing? Why was it here? How do I even know I'm on the right trail? Like, where is it right now? What's going on with the wind? Where is it in relation to me? So I love trailing because it puts us in the moment, but it also puts us in a story, a timeline of that animal and its experience. And now we're part of that story. Right. So when I look down that track, or I'm walking on that trail, or I touch it, or I step on it, or whatever I'm doing, I am now, boom, I'm in that story too. And I might be a very tiny, tiny chapter that no one's ever going to look at or read because I lose it in 2 seconds, but I'm in that story for a second. And I think that appeal to connect with the more than human world, that's why trailing is so exciting for me, because it makes me a participant, an active participant in that animal story.
I just want to throw out that quote again. I've never actually heard it said like that, but I loved it. You said, so tracking is like looking at letters to make words, and then trailing is looking at the words to actually make the stories. That was so nicely said, Dan.
That I believe my buddy Nate Harvey said that to me once, and it really stuck with me. So props to Nate, if it was him. I think it was. He's an amazing trailer of animals, so fun to trail with. He runs a group. He does intensives and does apprenticeships called Trackers Trail. He's out in Vermont, and just a sweetheart of a guy, just a wonderful person. Yeah.
Cool. We're getting close-ish to the end. I think I've got 2 more questions, and then maybe we'll do 1 or 2 from the audience if we have time, and then we'll probably get wrapped up. I'm going to throw a quick one here. So this one is from Delphine. She said, "Can you do Big Bird?"
Oh, it's been so long. Oh boy, I just remember it being really annoying. Like, Oscar, let's go play. Like, oh, it's just terrible. Yeah, so I know is the short answer, unless that happens to be Big Bird. But Big Bird is super. Yeah, Big Bird triggers me. So I'm not talking about Big Bird anymore.
All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Okay, I just felt your energy shift there.
See, and I thought you were all inclusive, Chris, and now you set me off. I mean, come on, man. What is this? This is all a setup, right? You just wanted to talk about Big Bird, piss me off, and see how I responded. So
Delphine just apologized.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. So where do we want to go? Couple questions left. I've got 1 question around trailing, and then 1 around conservation. So learning to trail. If somebody's interested in learning to follow wildlife and learn about the intricacies of their life through that story that they leave, what are just a couple of pointers for getting started in something like that?
Pick a large, heavy animal with hard feet. Moose are great. Pick an area where you can roam pretty far without concern for your well-being, safety, fear, legal issues, etc. Pick an area where the animals are pretty comfortable around people. They're used to people, because then you might actually get to see them, and they'll build your confidence. So Algonquin Provincial Park is a great place to trail moose. And I did it there many, many times. And feel free to start in the winter, but be mindful as well. These animals are not here for entertainment value. They're not just here for us to practice, and there are impacts. And I think it's just, you want to be conscious of those impacts. I'm not saying you should be guilty and feel bad that you're a human and you're having an interaction with an animal. I say the opposite. You just want to be conscious of the fact. Don't trail a moose after, there's like a 2-meter dump of snow that's wet and heavy and it's miserable and sad and exhausted. Don't do that. But, so be smart about it. So pick 1 animal. Boy, this could be an entire course. It's going to be hard. You're going to lose a trail. It's going to suck. You're going to want to quit. You're going to get distracted. It's really hard. It's really hard. It takes a lot of time. It's way easier to just look at the poop in the tracks and be like, moose poop, moose tracks, nice. Right? But to actually follow 1 moose, it's going to take a lot for most of us, unless you grew up with this and you somehow know it and it's intuitive. There's a podcast that it's called the Wilderness and Wellness Podcast. And this most recent episode is with a guy named Brian McConnell, who's an amazing trailer and teacher of trailing animals. And he does a nice job telling some stories about that. He grew up intuitively because he grew up in a hunting culture and community. He didn't even understand how good he was at trailing animals to find them, because that's what they ate. But he now teaches it to all sorts of people for a lot of reasons. So Brian's a tremendous resource. There's also a conference that starts, tomorrow night, the North American Wildlife Tracker Conference. And there are a couple of great sessions on trailing in there. I think it's just trackerconference.com. You can still sign up for that as well. So yeah, and ideally find a mentor, find an old timer, find a character in your community. Maybe it's like there's this woman who lives on this big chunk of land who is always outside doing stuff, and she knows the animals, she can follow them. I just find someone and see if you can find anyone. They're hard to find, people who know how to trail animals. That's why I'm sending you to specifics, but maybe there is someone in your community who can go out there with you too.
Awesome.
It's a hard skill.
Yeah. If you weren't watching the chat, Sherry Ann just shared the link to that podcast that Dan had mentioned in there. Thanks for throwing that in, Sherry Ann. Also, thanks for I totally forgot about the Trackers Conference this weekend. I got to register still, so I'm going to do that tonight. I'm really excited to see that. Okay, yeah, good. We're doing pretty good for time here. Couple more thoughts. Actually, maybe I'll just add 2 of my own thoughts on the trailing piece. One, obviously winter is such a great time to trail when you've got a nice fresh snow and you can just wander, is a great starting point, because trailing in leaves and pine needles, really, really hard. Or a good place is if you got a sandy spot, to even get on a deer, something like a deer trail or moose, and track it through the sand for a while and actually kind of pick up on that animal's face and the length of its step and how it's walking. And then maybe you get lucky and find that spot where you follow it down the sand and then it curves into the leaf debris. You might actually have a little bit more of a chance because you've got a little bit of a baseline of how it's moving first. And then myself, I find after it's rained and animals have been moving in the wet weather, if it's, let's say you had a really rainy couple of days and then you had like a morning where the kind of sun comes out, and that the deer and the moose were up moving around in the morning, I find sometimes like deer hooves like will really show in like wet leaf debris right after a rain. Now, of course, you had to have enough of a window that got them up moving, but deer are often moving even in the rain unless it's really crazy. So those are a couple tips that I'd maybe just throw in there for playing around with trailing as well. The last question I'd like to chat with you, Dan, before we kind of ask people where they can learn more and about stuff coming up. Let's chat about conservation a little bit and land stewardship, and how tracking can actually lead to us being better stewards of the land, maybe understanding wildlife populations, land management. It's a fairly broad question, so I'm open to you kind of going wherever you want with it. But yeah, what are your thoughts on tracking as a science to actually help us to be better stewards of the land?
I'll do one bird, then I'll talk about that. Let's see. That sounds like a horse. And then it goes. All right, screechy. Yeah, the old screech owl. Very nice. Such a cool bird. Anyway.
We had one of those singing the other night out our window.
If tracking is paying attention to the movement of energy, like I said it was earlier in my little world, in my mind, then as keystone species, which I believe human beings are, we have a disproportionate impact on our environment relative to our abundance, then I believe we have an obligation to pay attention to that and at least be conscious of it and hopefully do something about it. So if tracking is paying attention to the movement of energy, we say, how are we impacting other species around us? And what are some things we can actually do to, well, number one, figure out how much we are and how maybe we can ameliorate some of that impact and better understand it and yada, yada. So like last night, my wife and I were out monitoring amphibian crossings around vernal pools in our region. So getting involved in community science projects, which anyone can. Sometimes you can do them right from your computers and you do them out in public, it depends. I really encourage people to do those kinds of things. And you don't even necessarily have to have a great skill set. Most of them start with simple trainings. I've contributed to a lot of those kinds of projects with tracking skills and with bird skills and with amphibian. But sometimes, folks, it's not like you don't have to be quote unquote skilled. You just got to do the training and then you're good to go. So Project Nest Watch is a great one. And there's so many different opportunities for us to be conscious stewards and have some elements of reciprocity in our relationship with our wild neighbors. Ways we can give back by paying attention to their plight and how we're affecting them, and what are some things we can actually do to hopefully reverse some of those trends and harms. Sometimes it does feel hopeless, and it feels like we're just like making ourselves feel good. And I think for some species, that's true. They're going to go extinct because of what we do, but they won't all go extinct, and new ones are emerging, and we're just trying to figure out how to live in more harmony with them or with less damage. So that's what I would say, Chris. And so, yes, if you have like advanced skill sets in any area, especially wildlife tracking, you could connect with natural resource agencies or scientific projects, and you could, there's actually sessions at the Tracker Conference about actually paid tracking work on research projects and all this kind of stuff. So there are some opportunities there, but they're pretty limited, to be honest, to be fair. We don't want people to think, oh, I'm going to do all these cool work as a paid tracker. Doesn't usually work like that, unfortunately, not always. So anyway, yeah, contributing to existing projects in community or citizen science is probably one of the best ways we can kind of give back and have some acts of stewardship and conservation.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great, Dan. Thank you. I'm excited about some of those ones at the Trackers Conference. Actually, that's one of the reasons I'm turning in to hear some of the people speak to that. I can share a little bit about that just on because it's something I've thought a lot about, like even on a personal level, how does tracking impact my relationship with the land and the impact I'm having. And, so I mentioned, my wife's business, Wild Muskoka, we go out and we harvest wild foods from the land. And of course, we would never want to hurt or impact the land in a negative way, that we're going out and harvesting these products and selling them commercially. So tracking is actually a big part of the way that we do that as stewards. When we go into different patches, we're paying attention to, like, okay, from year to year, are these plants expanding? Are they going down? Are they staying the same? Are there other people coming in here and harvesting them? So we're looking for the tracks of other people in there. And for example, one of the wild leek patches that we used to go to and harvest, now we only cut the leaves from them. We don't harvest the bulbs commercially, which is something we just believe in as an ethic. But there was this one patch that we started harvesting years ago, and then we started actually finding lots of tracks of other humans coming in there, and basically realized, oh, wow, there's a lot of people coming to this patch. Let's not touch this patch anymore. And that actually triggered the thought in my mind being like, okay, well, when we're going in to harvest other patches, I actually want to be careful that we don't leave a track that someone else can follow. That's going to allow more people to maybe come in to harvest this plant there too, So that's one way we thought about it with plants. And then I've also thought about it, like Dan had kind of mentioned with turkey hunting. Hunting is definitely a part of my journey as well. We strive to eat as bioregionally as possible and to lessen our impact on the land, and to live with some degree of like self-reliance and food self-sufficiency. And we happen to live in an area where there's an abundance of wildlife, but not all wildlife are abundant, and those things change over time. And I've definitely changed decisions around hunting based on the tracks that I'm seeing every year, and basically being out in the woods all the time and getting an assessment of how many wildlife. And, a few years ago, I got really excited about moose hunting. And pretty quickly, within a couple of years, I was like, when we started really tracking the populations and over a period of time, I was like, you know what? I've actually noticed, even in a few years, that numbers of moose are going down in this area. Like, I don't actually want to do this anymore. So not in this region anyways, whereas there's other places, where I've been harvesting deer from for 8 years, and there's more deer there than when I started 8 years ago. So as somebody harvesting food, having some knowledge of tracking can actually help me think about my impact and whether it's sustainable to harvest right now or not, or do I take a little bit? Can I take a lot? So I've thought about it a lot from a food harvesting kind of perspective, tracking there. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, Dan, or.
That's awesome. Beautiful. Well said.
Cool. Well, we're at 9:29 right now, so let's chat a little bit about what you have going on, Dan, and then I'd like to share a couple of things, a couple cool free events, and I actually got a shout out about a cool online concert by a nature-inspired artist coming up this week. If folks want to hear some fun music this week that's all nature themed. But why don't we start with you, Dan? If people want to kind of follow you and check out what you have going on, I know I sent out a couple things to people in the email, but what do you have coming up?
So I have my course, one of those courses I teach called Talking with Birds. I've got a new section, actually starts next Wednesday. Yeah, it starts next Wednesday night. So yeah, a little less than a week away, and I still have some room in that course. You can find that on my website, leadwithnature.com. You can, that's the next, but I have a lot of good free stuff out there too on the YouTube channel. And you can look at my website for some other resources. I also do a lot of consulting and mentoring with clients, both individuals and businesses. So and I do have a few spaces right now. I think I have 3 or 4 open spaces for taking on some new clients. And that could be anything from kind of nature mentoring journey to leadership work in an organization or in your life. So it's quite a wide range. So those are probably 2 areas I would say that 2 ways you can get involved with me.
Awesome. That's great, Dan.
Yeah.
I'm just going to speak to Wendy's question there really quick, but she said, do you think numbers of moose is related to warming temperatures and the range is moving north? I feel like we could do a whole episode just on that and what's going on with the moose right now. But I would say, yes, that's one of many variables going on with moose. We're seeing a change in habitat happening. We're seeing change in climate happening. We're seeing changes in the species composition, and there's a relationship with moose and wolves and deer and humans. And then, of course, we're seeing hunting regulations. In Ontario, thankfully, in my opinion, and this can get a little bit heated, they actually just significantly changed the number of moose tags they're giving out and are reworking the system. And I know some hunters are peeved about that, but I'm completely in support of it myself. I think it'll be great to give the moose a break there. But there's many different variables coming together in that, Wendy, and that's a big conversation around tracking habitat and tracking history and time and different variables. So great question there. So the couple of events I want to mention. So one, she's actually on the call with us tonight, Nikki Satiri. Some of you folks might know. She used to work for the Pine Project, and now she works for an organization called Earth Path. But her and this other amazing girl, Reed, are actually running a concert on Tuesday night. And Nikki, I don't know if it's all nature themed, the concert, but she has all kinds of songs that are inspired by nature that are absolutely beautiful. So if you wanna support Nikki and tune in for something kind of fun and social, and my understanding is the call is actually going to be kind of interactive. So where they'll play a song and then they'll tell a story about what inspired the song, and then they'll maybe take a couple of questions, and then they'll play another song, and her and this girl Reed are going to go back and forth. Both of them incredible musicians. So that's something you might want to check out. Sherry Ann just shared where you can get tickets for Nikki's presentation on April 27th. And she also shared a link there where you can listen to some of Nikki's free music there as well. She's on Spotify and iTunes. So there's one little shout out I want to give right now. Nikki just said thanks in there. Hey, Nikki, thank you too for being such an awesome person. And then I'll just share a little bit about what's going on in my world these days. Some of you that have been around have been kind of hearing each week what I've going on. I've got one course that I run called Learning Nature's Language, or Reading Nature's Language. So if you go to www.learnnatureslanguage.com, it's basically an immersion into reading the signs of nature. We focus a lot on animals and tracks, but we do get into weather and birds and that nature. So if you want to check that out, actually the best place is just go to chrisoutdoors.ca, and you'll see a little bar that says courses, and you can check it out. And then the other one I want to mention that's actually new this week. So as I said, hunting has actually been a big part of my journey, and I truly believe it can be done incredibly sustainably and can be some of the healthiest, most sustainable meat that we eat in certain regions, and if it's done in a certain way. And there's actually a lot of growing interest in that right now. And a lot of people, like Dan kind of referenced, maybe a few generations back, they had a grandma or a grandpa or an uncle or an aunt that hunted, but they've had a couple generations now where that wasn't part of them, and they're interested to get into it, but they don't have a mentor. And there's so much to learn, especially around how to do it ethically and sustainably, and all the different skill sets and how do you get started. So me and Caleb Musgrave, who's actually on the call with us here tonight, Canadian Bushcraft, we're actually launching a mentorship called The Hunter's Journey, and it's going to be mostly online, and we're going to be starting in the September. And basically kind of walking you through all of those different things, from like ethics and preparing yourself mentally. So if you're interested in the idea of hunting, maybe you're a brand new hunter, maybe you're a vegan or a vegetarian. We actually did a beta version. We had a vegan on there that was just like, I'm a vegan because I don't like processed meat. But, if I was ever going to harvest food, that's the way I'd want to do it. And I'm actually going to just take this course just to figure out what it's all about. And they weren't actually sure if they wanted to hunt. They just wanted to come in and be in an open community, and we're totally open. So if that's interesting to you at all, I'd suggest, Sherry Ann just threw up a link there, but we have a podcast that I just recorded with Caleb the other day that we call The Hunter's Journey on the podcast. And we basically kind of talk about 8 different domains or kind of skill sets that I think are really important to consider if you want to make hunting part of your story and your journey and your relationship with the land. So you can check out that podcast to get an idea of what this kind of holistic approach to hunting is all about. And then you could go to the webpage, thehuntersjourney.com, to learn what the course is about if you want to know more. And the tagline we've been using for that course is learn to hunt with skill, respect, and heart. Because at the end of the day, the last thing I want to do is train people to go out into the woods that are going to do damage and that are going to actually bring populations down. So we'll be spending a lot of time talking about how to do it ethically and sustainably. And when we do it that way, it's not always putting our wants and needs first. Sometimes it's actually looking at the habitat and saying, nope, I can't do this today. And other times it's saying, nope, I can do this. So, and this is actually very sustainable and healthy for my family. So if that interests you, there's a couple links there. And I think that's everything that I wanted to mention here tonight. Thanks so much for joining us, Dan. It was truly a pleasure. I had a ton of fun tonight. You want to give us one last bird to close us out?
Oh boy.
You got one? You don't have to.
Sure. How about what's that?
Yeah,
oh, I will. Hold on a sec. How about oh, that's gonna be too low. So if you're not by the ocean and you miss it, there you go. It's our herring gull, one of my favorites. Underrated bird. Takes a lot of trash from people, but good bird.
You told me you couldn't do the action with the bittern, and then I just saw you kind of like really get into that there, Dan.
Oh, seabirds are different for me. They're
that ocean.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for showing up. And yeah, Chris, those courses sound awesome, man. I bet you're gonna get some nice turnout. Sounds great.
Awesome.
And thank you all for being here. Keep being good people.
Thanks, Dan. And hopefully you guys will come join us next week when I have Stephen Martin back on from the Sacred Gardener. And I'll send out an email in the next couple of days that has the replay, and I'll share some of the links that were chatted about tonight. So night, everybody. Signing off. Cheers.